a high-level exec, you'd get yourself an S-Class. 20 years later, here we are, you would still do the same thing, but if you were an absolute lunatic and you hated your employees, you buy an S63. So this is it, the 2025 S63 SE Performance. Costs an arm and a leg, and it's pretty much the love child of Mercedes-AMG. Reason why I say that, you have best of both. You have full electric to sneak out when you want to, and you have the roaring twin-turbo V8s that we all know and love. Combination of the two, you have 590 kilowatts, 1,220 newtons, and a 0 to 100 time of 3.5 seconds. Biggest problem with this car for me is that it ruins every other car you will ever drive. At the heart of the beast, as I said, we have our famous 4-litre twin-turbo V8. Now, beautiful thing as you can see is the twin turbos are directly on top of the engine to reduce the turbo lag, so making the experience much more visceral. The car itself, the engine produces about 450 kilowatts and 900 newtons on its own. And yes, it is thirsty, but at the end of the day, if you want the horses, you have to feed them. It is by far one of the most iconic engines Mercedes-Benz has ever made. This engine was pretty much introduced right after W204. It arrived with W205. And unfortunately, W206 is not in the WhatsApp group anymore. It is now the 2-litre 4-cylinder. However, that car does still perform. However, it does just unfortunately lack the soul. This car, on the other hand, does just about everything. So the second heart, if you will, of the S63 SE Performance is this. So this is essentially a plug-in hybrid. Now, as you can see, it isn't a DC charger, it's purely your AC charging, which means you can charge from home. If you do find a public charging station, you can charge from there as well. You cannot expect astronomical charging times. Essentially, the way this would work is you get home, you plug it in like your cell phone overnight, it charges, full charge next morning, happy days. You probably have about 20 kilometers of electrical range if you do want to drive in EV mode purely. However, if you do want to drive like the car should be driven, you're going to put it into Sport Plus. That way as well, the regeneration system will regen the electrical energy as quick as possible. So hypothetically speaking, in order for you to save the environment and drive in EV mode, you should be driving in Sport Plus more. So what you can't see underneath all of this is the electric motor is positioned right on the rear axle of the car. Now that doesn't mean that the electric motor only powers the rear wheels. Thanks to Mercedes-Benz and their very dynamic 4MATIC four-wheel drive system, the electric motor can power all four wheels at once. Now, the electric motor on its own produces 140 kilowatts and 300 newton meters of torque. So essentially a Polo GTI just on the rear wheels, just so you can get around in utter silence. Now, the rear of the S-Class design aspect speaking looks phenomenal. But one thing I will say in terms of practicality, I'm not going to say they haven't thought of it, but it definitely wasn't on their priority list. Now, as you can see, we have a whole bunch of camera equipment here and gear. However, the boot is quite shallow. It's not very deep. It does go quite far in, but you do have your charging cables there as well. So in terms of practicality, you can store things here, but unfortunately you can't put too much. So one of the most expensive optional extras on this car are the carbon ceramic brakes. Now, if you don't know what carbon ceramic brakes are, the brakes themselves are made of a carbon composites paired with an enormous and gargantuan brake disc. So essentially what happens is you have more than double the stopping power of your standard steel brakes. They are 87,000 Rand, which is a lot of money, but I mean, compared to other brands, for example, Aston Martin, their carbon ceramic brakes range anywhere from 100 to 200 to 300,000 Rand, depending on the model. So yes, they are expensive, but you do need it for this car. This car is 2.5 tons dry, without passengers and without fuel. So something you really need. If you don't get it, I think you're a bit of a chop. So the cockpit of the S63 is my favorite place to be for obvious reasons, love driving. But now the steering wheel is very much identical to the one you get in the C63, as well as these haptic feedback buttons. Now I know a lot of people have a huge gripe with the steering wheel and these controls. To be honest, so do I. They're a little bit irritating. You kind of accidentally bump things and you put things on mute or whatever the case is, but they still do work fairly well. Of course, my favorite buttons are the two toggles underneath where you can access the all different driving modes, as well as, of course, the sports exhaust. Now, if we move on forward, you have your main screen in front of you, as well as a heads-up display, of course, which is only available to the driver. No one else can physically see it. It is projected onto the windshield and shows you everything you need to use. I prefer looking at that because obviously you keep your eyes on the road as much as possible. And then if we go over to the main screen down here, this is what they call the MBUX system, the Mercedes-Benz user interface. This has pretty much everything, as well as their own built-in AI assistant, which can be quite cheeky, but also at the same time can be a little bit buggy if you're talking about the car a lot, because it'll think you're talking to it and it'll kind of just turn on and interrupt you. But at the end of the day, it's not about talking to the car, it's about driving the car. It is by far one of the most ridiculous cars I've ever driven. Now, as much as you can drive like an absolute roaring animal, you can also cruise in this car, so obviously it's an S-Class. Even the driver and the left side passenger also have heated, ventilated and massaging seats. So of course, you can just chill, relax, sit back and enjoy yourself. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with a happy ending, but the happy ending is the fact that you have the V8 2 feet in front of you and you can do 0 to 100 in 3.3 seconds. So the rear of the S-Class, as I said, this car does everything. This is kind of the place where you can either drive or be driven. Now, I know most people would like to be driven. Me personally, I'd probably drive. But the rear of the car, this is my seating position. I'm 5'7". I know God didn't give me the gift of height. But what I will say is this is by far one of the most luxurious places you can probably ever be in your entire life. You do have a wonderful pillow right behind your head. You can just pretty much fall asleep. And then if you move over here, you can see the car has a Burmeister sound system. Now this does come standard in Mercs more specifically. It's not a standard option. It is very good though. As well as the fact that you even have privacy blinds to make sure that the peasants don't see you. So you have that extra bit of security and safety. And another aspect for the rear of the car is this tablet. Now what's interesting is pretty much pops out. It is a Samsung tablet, but incorporated with Mercedes. You can control pretty much everything for the car from the rear seat. The rear seats are ventilated, heated, as well as massaging. And you can change everything from your lumbar support to the side bolster to the ambient lighting of the entire car. So very much as the driver has control, passengers do take priority. So the beauty with driving the S63 is that you get the best of both worlds, meaning that yes, it is a plug-in hybrid and you do have the power of driving around in pure EV mode, which I'm doing right now. So places where EV mode in the S63 SE Performance makes sense. Well, perfect example, this morning I wanted to leave quite early because I had an event I wanted to go to and I was at my in-laws house. So for example, when you start the car, it starts in electric only. So meaning that you can literally just sneak out and not wake anyone up. Unless they're your neighbors, then by all means wake them up. That's when EV mode makes sense. Now, also when you're in comfort mode, it will also still use the electric motor and still be in EV mode until you put your foot down. The moment you put your right foot down, all hell unleashes, because that's when the beautiful 4-litre twin-turbo V8 wakes up. And trust me, you can hear it. Now, one thing I will say is that because the car has such really good sound insulation, I mean, these are double glazed windows, to still give it the essence of an S-Class and not have noises from outside kind of interfere with the interior experience of the cabin. You do have some artificial exhaust noise pumped through the speakers. Now, what I do find is that, you know, it is pumped through the speakers primarily, obviously when you put your foot flat, especially if the windows are closed and you're just trying to like rev it a little bit, then you'll hear specifically the fact that it has a lot of artificial exhaust noise pumped through the speakers. I think it's called AMG Performance Sound. It's an optional extra. I don't think it has to do with the sports exhaust. I think that is standard. But from a car point of view, I do kind of get it because it is an S-Class and it is an S63 AMG. If it wasn't an S63 AMG, I don't think it would be as noticeable. But one thing I will say is that cruising in this car in comfort mode is such a nice experience, because even though you're just comfortably wafting along, enjoying your own company like I am right now, you can very quickly and easily get to 100 or 120 or whatever the case is as easy as anything. There's literally zero lag, there's zero weight, this car just flies. And I actually love that because it's almost like you're just giving a little bit of a stretch and the car wakes up and reminds you of who it is and what it can do. And I think that reminder is such a wonderful little way of being like, hey, I'm an AMG, don't forget about me. Because then what happens is you put into sport mode and everything starts waking up. The suspension becomes a bit stiffer, the throttle response becomes a little bit sharper, the brakes also become sharper. Now this car in specific has carbon ceramic brakes. Now if you know anything about carbon ceramics, is that they're very good, but they're also only very good when they're hot. So you do have to warm them up quite a bit. They do squeak a little bit here and there, but it does work very well once they're awake. And then of course you have the beauty of that V8 exhaust tone. Absolutely love it. And then you put it into Sport Plus. Now this doesn't have race mode, but it does have Sport Plus. that's as good as it's going to get. You do have a 9G-tronic transmission, so there are 9 gears. It does sound like a lot, but when you're on the highway, you do actually use gear 8 and 9 quite a lot. Just when you're cruising, it helps with fuel economy because, I mean, you're not going to be flooring it on the highway, whatever the case is. But just driving around in Sport Plus with the exhaust valves open, it's one of the best oral experiences you can absolutely have. End of story. By far one of the best experiences you can ever have in a car. And I think it's worth noting that this car has, as I said, over 1,000 Newton meters of torque, 1,220 to be exact, 590 kilowatts combined with the rear electric motor and the V8 up front. And it does the same 0 to 100 time as the C63 SE Performance. And that's quite insane considering that this car weighs 2.5 tons dry. It's literally ridiculous.